What would you do if the person you trusted the most, your closest friend, slowly turned your friendship into an endless cycle of borrowing money? This isn't just about dollars and cents. It's a story about trust, boundaries, and what it really means to be a friend. A 23-year-old thought he was helping someone he cared about, but soon realized he was being pulled into a web of manipulation. And when he finally chose to draw the line, everything exploded. I was 23 when this story began to unfold, but Ella and I had already known each other for years. By then, she was 25, a little older, a little wiser, or so I thought. We met through mutual friends during my first year in college. She had this kind of energy that pulled people in, like gravity. If she walked into a room, people noticed. Not because she demanded attention, but because she carried herself with such a blend of confidence and warmth that you almost wanted to be around her. Over time, we became close, not in a romantic way, but in that rare, solid way where you feel like you've found a person who just gets you. We'd grab coffee late at night when the world was quiet, wander through grocery stores just to pass the time, or drive with no destination, music blasting, windows rolled down. She knew my secrets, and I knew hers. To call her my best friend would almost feel like an understatement. She was family, chosen family. That's why, when the money thing started, I didn't think much of it. It was so small at first, so harmless. I remember the first time she asked. We had just finished watching a movie, some indie film she insisted was life-changing. Though I barely understood half of it, and we were standing outside the theater. She rummaged through her bag with this little frown, the kind you get when you've misplaced your keys or your phone. "Damn it," she muttered. "I left my wallet at home. I just need like $20 for gas to get back. I'll pay you tomorrow, swear." Of course, I said yes. Why wouldn't I? $20 wasn't a big deal. She was my friend. I didn't even think of it as lending money. I thought of it as filling the gas tank of someone who'd done the same for me a dozen times over, just in different ways, listening when I was down, keeping me company, pushing me to be braver. She paid me back a couple of days later. No drama, no tension, just a casual thanks again. "You saved me," and a hug that made me feel like I'd done something good, and that was at least for a while. The next time, it was $40. "Groceries," she explained with a sheepish grin, like she hated asking. I told her not to worry about it. She promised to pay me back by the end of the week, and she did. Again, no problem. Looking back now, I can see the pattern forming, like footprints in wet sand. But at the time, it didn't register. Because when you trust someone, when you care about them, you don't measure your relationship in dollars. You measure it in laughter, in loyalty, in the memories that stack up like Polaroid pictures pinned to the wall of your life. For months, it stayed that way, small amounts. Quick returns, no big deal. I didn't tell anyone about it, not because it was a secret, but because it wasn't worth mentioning. Friends help each other, right? That's what friendship is supposed to be. And besides, Ella had this way of making you feel like you were her lifeline. Like by saying yes, you weren't just giving her money, you were giving her the reassurance that you were there for her. No matter what. At that time, I didn't realize how intoxicating that dynamic could become. How easily the lines could blur between helping a friend and enabling a habit. The turning point didn't come all at once. It wasn't like she woke up one day and decided to drain my bank account. No, it was slower, subtler, like water dripping on stone, wearing it down one drop at a time. But back then, in those early days, I never questioned it. Ella was Ella, my friend, my confidant, my almost sister. And if she needed me, who was I to say no? Asterisk at first. The requests came once every couple of months. Nothing alarming, nothing out of the ordinary. But as time went on, they started showing up more often, like weeds you don't notice until your garden is overrun. It was always casual, always dressed in the soft fabric of friendship. Hey, I'm short on cash until Friday. Can you spot me 40? I forgot my card at home. Could you cover me for lunch? I'll Venmo you later. I'm in a tight spot this week. Just $60 to get me through. And every time I said yes, without hesitation, without calculation, because in my head this was Ella. She wasn't some random classmate or a co-worker I barely knew. She was my best friend. Saying no didn't even feel like an option. But the strange thing about repetition is that it dulls your awareness. The first time you notice it. The second time you remember it. The third time, it's already normal. By the fourth or fifth time, you stop keeping track. I told myself I wasn't keeping score because friends don't keep score. That's what Ella said once, laughing after I teased her for owing me too many coffees. Come on, she smiled, flipping her hair back like she always did when she wanted to disarm me. Friends don't count. That's what makes us friends. And I believed her. Or maybe I wanted to believe her, because the alternative that she was slowly taking advantage of me wasn't something I wanted to imagine still. Something in me shifted, almost imperceptibly. I started noticing the pauses before she asked, the way her voice dipped into a softer register, the way her eyes darted away as though even she knew this was becoming a habit. Sometimes she'd pay me back quickly. Sometimes it took weeks, with me gently reminding her 2 or 3 times before the money appeared in my account. And sometimes she simply didn't pay me back at all. One time, after a night out, I covered her drinks. Nothing crazy, maybe $70 in total. A week later, I texted her about it, not even asking for the money. Just joking, guess I'm your personal bartender now. She replied hours later with a laughing emoji and, you love me, you'll survive. That was it. No mention of paying me back. Just an assumption that I'd swallow it because, well, we were us. And I did. I let it slide. Because arguing over $70 felt petty compared to everything we'd been through together. But the truth was, it wasn't about the $70. It was about the slow erosion of balance. Friendships, like any relationship, need balance. Give and take. And somewhere along the way, the scales had tipped, and I was the one carrying the weight. It's funny how denial works. You see the signs, you feel the shift, but you brush it off because admitting it would force you to confront a truth you're not ready for. I told myself she was going through a rough patch, that she'd make it up to me, that this was temporary, but temporary turned into routine. There was one evening that stuck with me. We were sitting in her car outside my apartment. The air smelled faintly of fast food wrappers and her vanilla-scented air freshener. She was talking about how stressed she was with bills, how hard it was to make ends meet. I listened, nodding, feeling sympathy rise in me like a tide. Then came the ask. It always came. Could you lend me $100? Just until next week. I'll pay you back as soon as my paycheck hits. Her voice cracked a little, like the request embarrassed her. And in that moment, my heart softened. I reached into my wallet and handed her the bills. She squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with gratitude. You're seriously the best. I don't know what I'd do without you, and I believed her. Or maybe I needed to believe her, because those words, I don't know what I'd do without youth, they carried weight. They made me feel important, necessary, like I was her anchor in a storm. But anchors get heavy. Weeks passed. and that $100 never found its way back to me. I asked once, carefully, trying to sound casual. "Oh, right. I totally forgot," she said, her laugh quick and breezy. "I'll get you next time, promise, next time." That phrase became her shield, and I let it, because every time I thought about pressing harder, about insisting, I felt guilty, like I was betraying the unspoken code of our friendship. Friends help each other. Friends don't act like banks. But what happens when one friend keeps withdrawing and the other keeps depositing, with no balance in sight? The truth was gnawing at me, but I kept pushing it away, because admitting it meant facing the possibility that Ella wasn't the friend I thought she was. And that was a reality I wasn't ready to face, so I kept saying yes, even when my own budget started to feel tighter. Even when I found myself skipping out on small luxuries, like eating out or buying a new pair of shoes, because I'd given money away, I told myself it was fine, that it was worth it to keep the peace, to keep the friendship, to avoid the uncomfortable conversations that might fracture what we had. But deep down, a seed of resentment was beginning to grow. Small, almost invisible, but there, waiting, and eventually it would bloom into something I couldn't ignore. The breaking point didn't announce itself with fireworks or thunder. It came on an ordinary Tuesday evening, the kind of day you barely remember. I had just finished work, drained and ready to collapse into bed, when my phone buzzed with a message from Ella. "Hey, are you busy?" I hesitated before replying. I already knew where this was going. By then, her texts carried a pattern: a light opening, a pause, then the inevitable request. Still, I answered me. "Not really." "What's up?" She called instead of texting back. Her voice was soft, almost trembling, like she'd rehearsed the tone to sound both vulnerable and urgent. "Listen," she began, "I'm in a really tough spot. I hate asking you, but I need $300, just until the weekend. I swear I'll pay you back by Sunday, double quotes, 300. The number hung in the air, heavier than any amount she'd ever asked for before. My stomach tightened. This wasn't $40 for groceries, or 20 for gas. This was rent money. Bill money. Real money. I didn't answer right away, and she noticed. "I know it's a lot," she rushed on, "but I wouldn't be asking if I wasn't desperate. Something came up, and I don't have anyone else I can turn to. Please." The silence stretched. On one side of me, doubt gnawed. On the other, guilt pushed, and guilt won, like it always did. "All right," I said finally, "but I need it back by Sunday, okay? I really can't afford to be without it longer than that, of course." "You'll have it by Sunday. You're a lifesaver, honestly." She sounded so relieved, so grateful, that for a moment I felt good about it, like I'd done the right thing. But Sunday came and went. By Monday, I sent her a casual text. "Hey, just checking, do you have that money?" No response. Tuesday, "Ella, everything okay? I kind of need that money." She replied hours later, "God, you sound like a bank. I told you I'll get it to you. Stop stressing." The words hit me like a slap. A bank. That wasn't what I was doing. I wasn't charging her interest. I wasn't running credit checks. I was helping a friend. The only thing I asked for was honesty and respect for the deadline we'd agreed on. But instead of acknowledging that, she turned it around, made me feel like I was the one out of line. I typed and deleted a dozen responses. I wanted to scream. Do you know how many times I've said yes? Do you realize how much I've covered for you? Do you understand that I'm not made of money? But instead, I sent, I'm not trying to be a bank. I just need the money back when you said. No reply. 2 days later, she showed up at my apartment, acting like nothing was wrong. She plopped down on my couch, scrolling through her phone, chatting about a new show she was obsessed with. I sat there, stiff, the weight of those $300 pressing against my chest like a stone. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. Ella, I said, interrupting her mid-sentence. We need to talk. She glanced up, eyebrows raised. About what? The money. The 300? You said Sunday. It's Thursday. Her expression soured instantly. Seriously, you're still on about that? Yes, I'm still on about it, I shot back, my voice sharper than I intended. Because it's not pocket change, Ella. I trusted you to pay me back when you promised. She crossed her arms, defensive. God, you're acting like I'm some kind of criminal. I said I'd get it to you. Why are you being so cold? So transactional? Friends don't keep score. Something in me snapped. Friends don't keep score, I repeated, my voice shaking with anger. But friends also don't keep taking without giving back. Friends don't make you feel guilty for asking for what they owe. Do you realize how many times this has happened? How many times I've covered for you? And now you make me out to be the bad guy because I've finally said enough. Her eyes flashed with hurt, or maybe it was indignation. Wow, I can't believe you're talking to me like this. After everything, you're really showing your true colors. No, I said firmly, my chest burning. I'm finally setting boundaries. From now on, I'll help you if it's a real emergency, but there have to be conditions. You pay me back when we agree. No more excuses. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Her voice rose, sharp and cutting. You're unbelievable. I thought you were different. I thought you were my friend. But apparently, you're just another person who doesn't trust me. You're cold. You're selfish. You've changed. The words stung, but beneath the sting was clarity. For the first time in months, maybe years, I saw the situation for what it was. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about respect, about boundaries, about the kind of friendship I wanted to have, the kind I refused to accept. She stormed out that night, slamming the door behind her. The echo lingered long after she was gone. I sat there in the silence, staring at the empty space she'd left, wondering if this was the end, wondering if I'd lost my best friend or if I'd finally started to reclaim myself. The night Ella stormed out. I told myself it was temporary. We'd fought before, usually about smaller things, petty misunderstandings, forgotten plans, a snide comment taken the wrong way. But this felt different. The next morning, I checked my phone, half expecting a long apology text. Instead, there was nothing. No missed calls. No, I'm sorry. Just silence. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she needed space. Maybe she was embarrassed. Maybe, in a few days, she'd come back around. But instead of an apology, I got whispers. It started when our mutual friend Hannah invited me out for coffee. She stirred her latte slowly, avoiding my eyes. So, she said carefully, I heard you and Ella had a fight. My stomach sank. She told you? Hannah nodded. Yeah, she said you freaked out over some money. Freaked out. The word burned. That wasn't how it happened, but I could already see the narrative forming. The version Ella had spun, me as the cold, greedy friend, holding money over her head. I didn't freak out. I said firmly, I just asked her to pay me back when she promised. It's not the first time, Hannah. I've been covering for her for months. Hannah bit her lip, looking torn. I mean, yeah, she borrows sometimes. But isn't that what friends are for? That question hit me harder than I expected. Because wasn't that exactly how Ella always framed it? That friends help each other. That keeping track was petty. That saying no was cold. But I knew better now. Friends don't treat each other like ATMs, I said, my voice sharper than intended. It's not about the money, it's about respect, about trust. And she broke that. Hannah didn't respond. She just gave me a look I couldn't quite read, half doubt, half pity. By the end of the week, it was clear Ella was telling everyone. I started noticing people pulling away. Group chats went silent. Invitations stopped coming. When I finally ran into Mark, another mutual friend, he barely met my eyes. Hey, he said awkwardly. I don't want to get in the middle, but Ella's really hurt. She says you called her a user, that you embarrassed her. I felt my jaw tighten. I never said that. I told her I couldn't keep lending her money with no accountability. That's it. Mark shrugged. Look, I get it. But she's going through a lot right now. Maybe you could have cut her some slack. It was like I was shouting into the wind. No matter how I explained, it came back to the same thing. Ella was the victim, and I was the villain. The weight of it pressed on me everywhere I went. People I used to laugh with now looked at me sideways. Even at work, I caught myself second-guessing every interaction, wondering who had heard Ella's version of the story. It wasn't just about losing her. It was about losing the community we'd built together. One night, I sat alone on my couch, staring at my phone, scrolling through old photos of us, laughing at a concert, road tripping to the beach, sitting on my porch with beers and cheap pizza. Memories of the friendship I thought was unshakable. And then, in between the nostalgia, came the anger. How dare she? How dare she twist the story, paint me as cruel, erase everything I'd done for her? How dare she make me feel ashamed for asking for something so simple? Honesty, boundaries, respect. But beneath the anger, there was grief. A grief I couldn't shake. Because the truth was, I didn't just lose money. I lost trust. I lost connection. I lost one of the people I thought would stand beside me through anything. And Worcy didn't just walk away. She made sure I looked like the enemy as she did it. That weekend, I decided to take control of the narrative. I reached out directly to a couple of our closest friends. I sat with Hannah and Mark again, this time together. I told them everything, the small loans, the growing pattern, the $300 that became the breaking point. I showed them texts, the timestamps, the promises broken. This isn't about being greedy, I said, my voice steady but heavy. This is about being taken advantage of. About how much it hurts when your best friend treats you like a resource instead of a person. There was a long pause. Finally, Hannah sighed. I didn't know it was that bad. Mark nodded slowly. Yeah. She left out a lot of that. In that moment, I realized something important. Silence helps the wrong story grow. Ella had been loud. I had been quiet, hoping the truth would speak for itself. But sometimes, the truth needs a voice. The fallout didn't fix overnight. Some people still sided with Ella. Some stayed neutral. But at least now, the weight wasn't all on me. And in the middle of that chaos, I found something I hadn't expected: clarity. I saw who my real friends were, the ones who listened, who asked, who cared enough to hear both sides. And I saw who vanished the second things got messy. It was painful. It was isolating. But it was also liberating, because once you stop being afraid of losing people, the silence between Ella and me stretched into weeks. No texts, no calls, just an aching void where there used to be laughter, inside jokes, and midnight conversations about nothing and everything. At first, I thought maybe I'd miss her more. Maybe I'd feel the urge to cave, to send that one apologetic text just to smooth things over. But the longer the silence lasted, the more I realized something unexpected. I didn't miss her as much as I thought I would. What I missed was the idea of her version, of Ella who used to make me feel seen, who used to be my partner in crime, who used to swear we'd always have each other's backs. That Ella had been gone for a long time. The real Ella, the one who scoffed when I asked for accountability, who turned our friends against me, was still very much present. And for the first time, I saw her without the rose-colored glasses. One afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number. No greeting, no explanation. Just one line: "You've changed." It was Ella. I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. Changed. I typed out a dozen responses. "No, I've just stopped letting you use me." "Funny, I was thinking the same thing about you." Changed doesn't mean wrong. But in the end, I deleted them all. I didn't owe her a defense. Not anymore. Instead, I powered off my phone and went for a walk. It was early fall, the kind of day where the air was crisp but not yet cold, the trees just starting to turn amber and red. I walked for hours, letting the rhythm of my steps steady the storm inside me. And as I walked, I thought about everything that had happened, not just with Ella, but with me, because the truth was, I'd allowed it. I'd let the pattern form. I'd said yes when I wanted to say no. I'd convinced myself that keeping the peace was more important than keeping my dignity. But that wasn't friendship. That was fear. And I was done living in fear. When I finally got home, I sat down at my desk and opened my journal. I hadn't written in months, maybe longer, but the words poured out of me like a flood. I wrote about the first $20 loan, the $40 follow-up, the excuses, the delays, the "I'll get you back Friday" promises that never came. I wrote about the $300 breaking point, the fight, the accusations, but I didn't stop there. I wrote about me. About the boy who hated conflict so much he'd rather bleed quietly than speak up. About the young man who thought being generous meant being silent. About the friend who lost himself in the name of keeping someone else happy. And then, at the bottom of the page, I wrote one line in bold letters: "Boundaries are not betrayal." I stared at those words for a long time, and slowly I started to believe them. In the weeks that followed, I made changes. Small ones, at first. Saying no when co-workers asked me to cover their shifts last minute. Politely declining when a neighbor tried to rope me into doing extra favors. Each time, my voice shook a little less. Each time, the guilt weighed a little lighter. And as I grew stronger, the space Ella left in my life didn't feel so empty anymore. It felt like room for better people, healthier connections. Friendships built on balance instead of obligation. One Friday night, I found myself at a small gathering hosted by a friend I hadn't seen in months. At first, I was nervous and unsure who believed Ella's version of the story. Unsure if I'd be walking into side-eyes and whispered judgments. But to my surprise, the night was good. We played board games, shared takeout, laughed until our stomachs hurt. No tension, no drama. Just people enjoying each other's company. At one point, Hannah pulled me aside. "I've been thinking about what you said," she admitted softly. "About boundaries, about respect. You were right. I should have had your back sooner." I smiled, a real one this time. Better late than never. It wasn't a perfect fix. Some friendships remained fractured. Some people still avoided me. But the ones who stayed, they mattered more than ever, because they stayed for the right reasons. As for Ella, she faded into the background. I'd see glimpses of her on social media, new friends, new inside jokes, the same old cycle dressed in fresh packaging. Sometimes it stung. Sometimes I wondered if she ever thought about me, about what we lost. But mostly, I felt free, free from the constant worry, free from the guilt trips, free from the gnawing fear that saying no would make me unworthy of love. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of being alone, and that, I realized, was the beginning of something new. Not the end of a friendship, but the start of a better chapter, one where kindness wasn't mistaken for weakness, where loyalty didn't mean losing myself, where love wasn't measured in unpaid debts, a chapter where I finally learned the difference between being generous and being used. It started on a Tuesday evening, the kind of night where nothing seems remarkable. I was sprawled on my couch, halfway through a reheated slice of pizza, when my phone buzzed. It was Ella. At first, I hesitated. By that point, her texts had become predictably, usually another ask for money, another vague, "I'll pay you back Friday." But against my better judgment, I opened it, double quotes, "Hey, can you call me? It's urgent." The word urgent made my stomach twist. I dialed, and she picked up on the first ring. Her voice was tight, rushed. "Listen, I really, really need your help. It's kind of serious." There was a pause, heavy enough to make my chest tighten. "I need $300. I blinked. "300? Yeah," she said quickly, "just for a little while. It's an emergency. I swear I'll pay you back this weekend. I promise." Promises. Always promises. My first instinct was to say no, to remind her of the dozens of other times she'd said the same thing, only to delay, deflect, or disappear when repayment came up. But then she added, "If I don't get it, I could lose my place. Please, you know I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious." And just like that, guilt pierced through my defenses. The thought of her struggling, maybe even being homeless, it was too much. So I said yes. VENMO, $300. Gone in seconds. The relief in her voice was immediate. Thank you, you're a lifesaver. I swear, end of the week, you'll have it back. No excuses. But the thing about promises is, they're only as good as the person making them. By Friday night, my phone was quiet. No repayment, no explanation, just radio silence. I waited until Saturday, then Sunday. Nothing, finally. On Monday, I texted her, "Hey, just checking in. You said you'd have the money back this weekend. When can I expect it? The reply didn't come until hours later. Ugh, can we not do this right now? I'm dealing with a lot. I'll get it to you soon. I stared at the screen, heat rising in my chest. Not sorry. Not thank you for being patient. Just annoyance like I was the one being unreasonable. For the next few days, I wrestled with myself. Should I press harder? Should I give her more time? Should I swallow the frustration, like I always did? But something inside me had shifted. Maybe it was the amount $300 wasn't pocket change anymore. Maybe it was the accumulation of broken promises. Or maybe it was the realization that this wasn't friendship anymore. This was dependence, manipulation. By the end of the week, I couldn't stay silent. I called her. My voice shook, but I pushed through. Ella, we need to talk. I can't keep doing this. I don't mind helping in real emergencies, but this has become a pattern. You asked for $300. You promised you'd pay me back, and now you're dodging me. That's not fair. There was a long pause. Then her laugh, sharp, bitter. Wow, you really sound like a bank right now. The words cut deeper than I expected. A bank. I echoed, yeah. Keeping score, demanding timelines, acting like money is more important than friendship. That's not what real friends do. I gripped the phone tighter, my pulse pounding. No, Ella. Real friends don't take advantage of each other. Real friends don't make the other feel guilty for asking for what was promised. This isn't about money. It's about respect. Her tone turned cold. You've changed. You're not the same person you used to be. Maybe she meant it as an insult, but for the first time, I didn't take it that way. Because she was right. I had changed. I was finally standing up for myself, but at that moment, all I felt was rage and heartbreak. I wanted to shout, to list every single time I'd covered for her, every dollar I'd loaned, every promise broken. But instead, I took a deep breath. I'm not doing this anymore, I said quietly. From now on, if you ask me for money, it has to be a real emergency. And if I say yes, I need your word, you'll follow through. No more excuses. There was silence. Then, suddenly, her voice rose, sharp and furious. You're unbelievable. After everything I've been through, you want to nickel-and-dime me like some heartless stranger. You really are cold. And just like that, she hung up. The line went dead. But my head was still buzzing, cold, heartless, a bank. The words replayed in my mind over and over, like a broken record, but beneath the sting, a strange clarity settled in. I wasn't cold. I wasn't heartless. I was tired of being used. And maybe, just maybe, drawing that line was the most human thing I'd ever done. Asterisk, after that phone call, silence should have been a relief. Instead, it became a weapon. For a few days, Ella didn't reach out. No texts, no calls, nothing. I told myself maybe that was good. Maybe space would cool things down. Maybe we'd find our way back to some kind of middle ground. But then the whispers started. The first one came from a mutual friend named Sam. We were at a casual get-together, a barbecue in someone's backyard. People were laughing, passing around drinks, tossing beanbags in a cornhole game. For the first time in weeks, I almost felt normal until Sam leaned over, lowering his voice. So, what's going on with you and Ella? My chest tightened. What do you mean? He shrugged, too casual. She's been telling people you flipped out over some money. That you made her feel small. that you basically called her a user. The words stung, not because they were true, but because they were so twisted. I didn't call her that, I said quickly. I just set a boundary. I couldn't keep lending her money with no accountability. It wasn't fair. Sam gave me a look that was hard to read, somewhere between sympathy and suspicion. I don't know, man. She seemed really upset. I wanted to scream. Of course, she was upset because, for the first time, I didn't cave. But the way Sam said it made me sound like the bad guy, the cold friend who cared more about dollars than loyalty. That was just the beginning. Within a week, I noticed little shifts everywhere. Group chats went quiet whenever I chimed in. Invitations got lost. People who used to joke with me now avoided eye contact. It was subtle at first, but then it got louder. One afternoon, I bumped into Hannah at the coffee shop. She hesitated before saying hi, like she wasn't sure if we were still on the same side. I don't want to get in the middle, she started, her voice cautious, but Ella's really hurt. She says you embarrassed her, made her feel like she couldn't count on you. Embarrassed her. The memory of that phone call flashed in my mind, her laughing, mocking me for acting like a bank. I didn't embarrass her, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I asked her to keep a promise. That's it. But Hannah's expression told me she wasn't sure what to believe. That was when it hit me. Ella wasn't just ignoring me. She was rewriting the story. In her version, she was the vulnerable friend in need. I was the cold, heartless one, tallying favors like dollar bills. And because she told her version first and louder, it stuck. I felt like I was trapped in quicksand. The harder I tried to explain myself, the deeper I sank. One night, I sat at home, staring at the ceiling, phone buzzing with notifications from group chats I couldn't bring myself to open. I felt erased, like the person I'd been in those friendships no longer existed, replaced by Ella's caricature of me. The loneliness was suffocating. But underneath the loneliness, anger burned, not just at Ella, but at myself, for letting it get this far, for ignoring the red flags, for mistaking silence for peace, generosity for love. I kept replaying our last fight in my head, her voice sharp and dismissive. You're unbelievable. Cold, heartless. At first, those words crushed me. But the more I sat with them, the more I realized something. They weren't about me. They were about her. Because when people can't control you anymore, they start to control the story. And that's exactly what Ella was doing. I started to notice patterns in her behavior, the way she'd always frame things so she was the victim, the way she'd make me question my own memory of events. It was like she knew exactly how to twist the knife without ever getting her hands dirty. It dawned on me, this wasn't just about money. It never had been. This was about power. Every time I said yes, she gained more control. Every time I stayed silent, she rewrote the script. And the moment I finally stood up for myself, she didn't just lose access to my wallet. She lost control over me, and she couldn't stand it. That realization didn't fix everything, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in weeks: clarity. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't the villain of this story. I was just the one who finally said no. But even with that clarity, the fallout was brutal. The next time I scrolled through social media, I saw Ella at a party smiling, surrounded by people who used to be my people too. The caption read, "Real friends don't keep score." My stomach dropped. Was it directed at me? Of course it was. And the likes, the comments, hearts, clapping hands. Preach felt like knives. I closed the app, tossed my phone aside, and buried my face in my hands. It was one thing to lose Ella. It was another to watch her take pieces of my world with her. But as I sat there in the dark, something inside me hardened. I couldn't control what Ella said. I couldn't control who believed her, but I could control how I responded. And for the first time, I decided my response would be silence, not the silence of guilt or fear or avoidance, but the silence of someone who finally understood. I didn't owe anyone an explanation for setting a boundary, not Ella, not our friends, not the world, because deep down I knew the truth. And eventually, the truth has a way of speaking louder than lies. Asterisk. After that phone call, silence should have been a relief. Instead, it became a weapon. For a few days, Ella didn't reach out. No texts, no calls, nothing. I told myself maybe that was good. Maybe space would cool things down. Maybe we'd find our way back to some kind of middle ground. But then the whispers started. The first one came from a mutual friend named Sam. We were at a casual get-together, a barbecue in someone's backyard. People were laughing, passing around drinks, tossing beanbags in a cornhole game. For the first time in weeks, I almost felt normal until Sam leaned over, lowering his voice. So, what's going on with you and Ella? My chest tightened. What do you mean? He shrugged, too casual. She's been telling people you flipped out over some money, that you made her feel small, that you basically called her a user. The words stung, not because they were true, but because they were so twisted. I didn't call her that, I said quickly. I just set a boundary. I couldn't keep lending her money with no accountability. It wasn't fair. Sam gave me a look that was hard to read, somewhere between sympathy and suspicion. I don't know, man. She seemed really upset. I wanted to scream. Of course she was upset, because for the first time, I didn't cave. But the way Sam said it made me sound like the bad guy, the cold friend who cared more about dollars than loyalty. That was just the beginning. Within a week, I noticed little shifts everywhere. Group chats went quiet whenever I chimed in. Invitations got lost. People who used to joke with me now avoided eye contact. It was subtle at first, but then it got louder. One afternoon I bumped into Hannah at the coffee shop. She hesitated before saying hi, like she wasn't sure if we were still on the same side. I don't want to get in the middle, she started, her voice cautious, but Ella's really hurt. She says you embarrassed her, made her feel like she couldn't count on you, embarrassed her. The memory of that phone call flashed in my mind, her laughing, mocking me for acting like a bank. I didn't embarrass her, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I asked her to keep a promise. That's it. But Hannah's expression told me she wasn't sure what to believe. That was when it hit me. Ella wasn't just ignoring me. She was rewriting the story. In her version, she was the vulnerable friend in need. I was the cold, heartless one, tallying favors like dollar bills. And because she told her version first and louder, it stuck. I felt like I was trapped in quicksand. The harder I tried to explain myself, the deeper I sank. One night, I sat at home, staring at the ceiling, phone buzzing with notifications from group chats I couldn't bring myself to open. I felt erased, like the person I'd been in those friendships no longer existed, replaced by Ella's caricature of me. The loneliness was suffocating, but underneath the loneliness, anger burned, not just at Ella, but at myself, for letting it get this far, for ignoring the red flags, for mistaking silence for peace, generosity for love. I kept replaying our last fight in my head. Her voice, sharp and dismissive. You're unbelievable. Cold, heartless. At first, those words crushed me. But the more I sat with them, the more I realized something. They weren't about me. They were about her, because when people can't control you anymore, they start to control the story, and that's exactly what Ella was doing. I started to notice patterns in her behavior, the way she'd always frame things so she was the victim, the way she'd make me question my own memory of events. It was like she knew exactly how to twist the knife without ever getting her hands dirty. It dawned on me, this wasn't just about money. It never had been. This was about power. Every time I said yes, she gained more control. Every time I stayed silent, she rewrote the script. And the moment I finally stood up for myself, she didn't just lose access to my wallet, she lost control over me. And she couldn't stand it. That realization didn't fix everything, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in weeks: clarity. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't the villain of this story. I was just the one who finally said no. But even with that clarity, the fallout was brutal. The next time I scrolled through social media, I saw Ella at a party, smiling, surrounded by people who used to be my people too. The caption read, "Real friends don't keep score." My stomach dropped. Was it directed at me? Of course it was. And the likes, the comments, hearts, clapping hands. Preach felt like knives. I closed the app, tossed my phone aside, and buried my face in my hands. It was one thing to lose Ella. It was another to watch her take pieces of my world with her. But as I sat there in the dark, something inside me hardened. I couldn't control what Ella said. I couldn't control who believed her, but I could control how I responded. And for the first time, I decided my response would be silence. Not the silence of guilt or fear or avoidance, but the silence of someone who finally understood. I didn't owe anyone an explanation for setting a boundary. Not Ella, not our friends, not the world, because deep down I knew the truth. And eventually, the truth has a way of speaking louder than lies. Asterisk. The silence I'd chosen gave me peace for about a week. I thought maybe if I just kept my head down, people would forget. Friend groups have short memories, right? A new drama always comes along to replace the old one. But Ella wasn't letting go. One Friday evening, I walked into a local bar where a bunch of us usually gathered after work. It wasn't planned, I just needed a drink, some noise, anything to drown out the endless loop of thoughts in my head. When I stepped inside, I spotted them right away, our circle, clustered around a big table near the back. Laughter rose over the clink of glasses. For a moment, my chest ached with nostalgia. Then I saw her, Ella, leaning back in her chair, arms animated, telling some story. Everyone's eyes were on her. I hesitated, then forced myself forward. Maybe this was the chance to clear the air. Double quotes. "Hey guys," I said, trying to sound casual. The laughter died. Heads turned. The pause lasted less than 2 seconds, but it felt like a lifetime. Finally, Jake muttered, "Hey man," before taking a sip of his beer. I pulled out a chair. "Mind if I sit?" No one said no, but no one said yes either. I sat anyway, heart pounding. Ella smirked. "Wow, look who decided to join the living." A few chuckles. My throat went dry. "I've just been busy," I said. She tilted her head, faux concern dripping from her tone. Busy counting pennies. The table erupted with laughter. Heat rushed to my face. I wanted to stand up, to storm out, but something inside me snapped. No, I said, voice steady but louder than I expected. Busy trying to remember when friendship turned into a loan application. The laughter cut off. A few people exchanged looks. Ella's smile faltered for a split second, then returned, sharper. You make it sound like I've been scamming you or something. I leaned forward, hands clasped to stop them from shaking. I never said that. What I said was simple. You promised to pay me back. And when I reminded you, you laughed at me. You made me feel like a fool for even asking. The words hung in the air. For once, Ella didn't have an immediate comeback. Instead, she scoffed. You're twisting this. I was going through a rough time, and instead of being there for me, you turned it into a business transaction. That's cold. I could feel the eyes around the table shift, some toward me, some toward her. The tension was thick, like the moment before a storm breaks. I swallowed hard. Being there for you doesn't mean letting you walk all over me. Real friendship isn't about how much money I can give you, it's about respect. And you lost mine the second you started telling people your version of the story without ever admitting what actually happened. That was when it happened. Sam, the same friend who'd first hinted at the rumors, spoke up. Wait, he said slowly. So, did you actually pay him back? The question sliced through the noise like a blade. Ella froze. For the first time since this whole mess began, the spotlight shifted. People weren't just looking at me, they were looking at her, waiting. Her jaw tightened. That's not the point, she said, dodging. But it was the point, and everyone knew it. The silence that followed wasn't the warm, comfortable kind. It was awkward, exposing. I took a breath. Look, I don't want to fight. I just want the truth out there. I'm not cold. I'm not heartless. I'm someone who trusted a friend, and that trust got thrown back in my face. My voice cracked a little on that last part, and I hated it. But maybe the crack made it real, because when I looked up, I saw something I hadn't seen in weeks. Doubt in their eyes. Doubt about Ella's story. Jake cleared his throat. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe this whole thing got blown out of proportion. Ella bristled. So now you're taking his side. Jake raised his hands. I'm not taking sides. I'm just saying, if you owe him money, maybe you should just pay him back. End of story. The table went quiet again, and for once, I didn't feel like I was the one on trial. Ella's lips pressed into a thin line. She stood abruptly, grabbing her purse. You know what? I don't need this, she stormed out. No one followed. I sat there, stunned, adrenaline buzzing through my veins. For weeks, I'd been drowning in her narrative, convinced I had no way to fight back. But in that moment, I realized something powerful. The truth doesn't need to scream. It just needs to be spoken, and when it finally is, it has a way of cutting through the noise. That night didn't fix everything. Not all my friends came back. Some probably never will. But for the first time, I felt lighter, stronger, because I wasn't hiding anymore. And once you stop hiding, the lies start to lose their power. By the third week of the social media storm, the tension had reached a point where I could feel it even in the quiet moments. Every notification made my stomach twist. Every ping felt like another battle. But by now, I had grown more deliberate, more patient. I stopped checking posts obsessively. Instead, I focused on direct communication with friends who mattered, those who had seen both sides. I shared facts, timelines, screenshots, nothing emotional, no accusations, just the truth. It was exhausting, yes. But there was a strange relief in documenting everything, in creating a solid foundation for my own peace of mind. Then one night, after weeks of posts and whispers, I realized something. Ella's power was only as strong as the attention I gave her, and I had been giving it far too much. The next morning, I deleted the notifications, muted her posts, and focused on my own life. I worked, I wrote, I reconnected with friends who had been quietly supportive. Slowly, the constant anxiety lifted. It wasn't magic. It wasn't an instant fix, but I no longer felt like I was walking on eggshells. I didn't block her. Part of me wanted her to see that I could stand my ground. But I did set firm boundaries. No loans, no private conversations about money, no rehashing arguments. Any interaction would be neutral, factual, and controlled. And when the occasional post came, the drama flared briefly. I took a deep breath and let it pass, because I had learned the most important lesson. Boundaries are not betrayal, and self-respect is not selfishness. By the end of that month, I felt like I had reclaimed something far more valuable than money: my autonomy, my confidence, my voice. I didn't need to convince everyone. I didn't need to win every argument. I just needed to stand firm in my truth, and that was enough. After months of tension, silence became my ally. Ella gradually faded from my immediate world, not because I held a grudge, but because I stopped giving her control. I reconnected with friends who valued honesty over drama. Conversations with Hannah and Sam became more grounded. They admitted that seeing both sides had helped them understand me better, and slowly, trust was rebuilt in some relationships. The money, I never pressed for it again. It wasn't about the $300 anymore. It was about the lesson. Never let someone manipulate your generosity. Ella and I never returned to the friendship we had. I accepted that some relationships end not because of betrayal, but because people reveal who they really are under pressure. And that truth, however painful, is liberating in its own way. Looking back, I see a journey, from naive generosity to frustration and hurt, to standing firm and reclaiming my voice. I learned that kindness isn't weakness, and saying no doesn't make you a bad friend. Some nights, I think about what could have been if honesty had been mutual, if promises had been kept, if boundaries had been respected. But dwelling on that doesn't help. What matters is what I've learned. Trust is earned, not assumed. Boundaries are essential for healthy relationships. Generosity without respect is exploitation. Standing up for yourself is not betrayal, it's survival. In the end, the storm revealed not the loss, but the growth. And while the friendship with Ella ended, the lessons I gained remain. I am stronger now, clearer, unafraid to say no, unafraid to protect myself. And in that, I found a peace that money, favors, or friendships manipulated by lies could never take away.